how is it that one form of the anima mundi, Homo sapiens, and one particular subset of that species, has enacted this fateful neglect, the repression of the anima mundi? Let me put it another way. How is it that in certain respects the most brilliant species, in certain respects the most brilliant civilization, the most brilliant era, has produced the tremendous catastrophe that the earth is now undergoing? What is it about the modern mind and modern self which is so intrinsic to who each of us is and to our entire civilization? What is it about it that it's begun to crash the entire Cenozoic era? I love Kwami's theme yesterday over and over again about how myth can help us to move outside our situation or more deeply into it, to give us a perspective on it. Let's try to glimpse a myth in the crisis and turmoil of our time. And here's the clue to the myth that I think we might be living out. In one of his later works, much later works, Joseph Campbell said, "The heliocentric universe has never been translated into a mythology." I think this is pointing to something that we need to think about, because I think we are living through a mythos, a powerful one, in which, let me call it the heliocentric self, who is us, is undergoing a journey. And the best way I can very quickly give a sense of that journey is to first contrast the disenchanted cosmos of the modern with the anima mundi, participation mystique of the primal worldview. I know many of you have seen this in this diagram that I put together in other talks. So cosmos and psyche. Let me see if I can expand that. How did I expand that last time? Well, on the left, think of that as the primal worldview, where the shading is represents where soul and spirit and I'm going to just avoid the soul-spirit radical dichotomy for a moment right now, where spiritual presences exist in invisible presences in the trees, in the river, in the heavens, in the land, and the self is permeably embedded within that anima mundi. It's a participation mystique. The divine is in the world. The self can participate in the divine. The self is also embedded in the whole tribal matrix, but the whole tribal matrix is embedded in the entire land and animals and flora and fauna. And by contrast, the Cartesian self has the sharp differentiation between the human self, the human subject, which from a world of objects in which the world is completely voided of all those presences, all that anima mundi. And if we, let's see, on the left you can see this is the way in which the entire anima mundi has in some sense been assimilated into the modern self, like into it's all the meaning and purpose in the world, like a vacuum cleaner, has been taken into us, and now we feel that we are the center, and the sole locus of meaning and purpose in a meaningless universe. And from that point of view, it's very, looks like a pretty simple error, but it's too simple. And my bias here is not to think about, as we think about the evolution of our consciousness and of worldviews, it's very easy to, in our circles in particular perhaps, to fall into a view of that evolution where there's basically two orientations for understanding reality in the cosmos, one of which is obviously far inferior to the other. And the inferior one is what modernity chose, while we have the superior perspective that can solve our evolutionary problems. The usual way of looking at it is just the opposite, of course, and that's also sharply this or that. What interests me is why modernity chose the orientation that it did. What attracted and compelled many thoughtful people to believe what they did, and how much more complex and intricate is the dialectic that brought us to this point. Rather than a simple truth versus error, I'm more engaged by insights that show how light and shadow are much more complexly interconnected at each stage and ever evolving. So